Since January 20th of the year of our Lord 2025, the current presidential administration has made it clear that one of their biggest goals is a frankly baffling level of dismantling critical government agencies and services. I say baffling mostly due to the sheer amount of cut funding and workers fired, but I also have some favorites, like the efforts to get rid of the Department of Education, firing air traffic controllers, getting rid of people overseeing the bird flu epidemic in the middle of a serious bird flu epidemic, and so much more. And I'm sure a lot of people are surprised as well. What's with targeting the Department of Education or the VA? Why do they hate Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security so much? Don't people need that to live and stuff? What's the point? Why would anyone want to make the government so unable to operate? It's certainly understandable to be taken aback by all this, but I want to make a quick point that we shouldn't be surprised, and we should make sure that the people we know don't continue to be surprised by these developments, and not just because they literally said they were going to do all this. The main factor in what we're seeing isn't incompetence or insanity. It isn't just the power trip of one painfully embarrassing freak or the workings of one uniquely bad administration. This is all just a natural point of progression on the conservative line of thought. Conservative ideology is defined by the desire for a less functional government. Perhaps in civics you had it explained in more generous terminology. On the simplest political spectrum, you have conservatives wanting smaller government versus liberals wanting bigger government. It's fiscal conservatism versus fiscal liberalism. But think about what that actually means in practice. The big government in question is the one responsible for the social welfare programs that prevent people from dying just because they're poor, among other things. And less attention is given to the big government that funds medical research, that makes sure planes don't crash, that makes sure your food is safe to eat and your water is safe to drink. These services might not always be at the top of our minds, but they are critical to the well-being of our society. And the small government advocated by conservative politicians is one with less of all of these things. The goal of the left side of the political spectrum is to use government as a tool to protect and uplift the common people. The goal of the right is to prevent that from happening. The first mindset is what led to the most intense period of growth in American history and the creation of the greatest superpower in all of human history, as the mandate of the people allowed Franklin Roosevelt and his administration to lead us through recovering from the Great Depression, transforming the economy into one that would be more comfortable for the working man, and fighting to liberate continents from fascist control. The second mindset is one of isolation and selfishness and has led to the slow rot of working class American life we've seen over the last few decades, all the way up to the acceleration that's been going on since January 20th. The subject that makes the split between the left and right most clear, in my opinion, is taxation. Determining if someone believes in contributing to their society in order to maintain and improve it with special attention given to those worst off, or if they believe everyone should keep their wealth to themselves, serves as a pretty good indicator that they either believe in coming together to collectively help each other, or that they want people to be left to their own devices. If they believe in loving their fellow humans as themselves, or if they're on the path to hell. Conservative beliefs ultimately stem from a core principle that it's okay to not do anything about the suffering of other people, that doing things to help people other than yourself has no moral value, and this is usually applied specifically to the government for arbitrary reasons. If your buddy is moving into a new place nearby, you should take some time out of your day to give him a hand. If you see someone drowning, you should prevent them from doing that in some way. I don't think these are complicated ethical situations, but if we're talking about a society collecting revenue from its citizens, each at an amount tailored to their income so that it will not harm their quality of life, and then spending that on programs that benefit all of society, often at great returns, suddenly there's something to be argued against. One can easily imagine a divorced insurance salesman who drives one of these and lives in the suburbs in a house like this. This man votes Republican because he does not like the idea of any portion of his income contributing to an effective program to house or feed or give work to the homeless man he saw sleeping on a street corner last Tuesday. Ignoring the potential downstream economic benefits of this poor man becoming better integrated into society, our salesman could say to himself, I want a little bit of my money to be spared towards a collective societal effort to improve this man's life. But instead, he says, I hope nothing is done. He says this because he does not believe government should be used as a collective tool to benefit all. The thing is, though, that's what all of government is meant to be. If the driver of the Dodge Toddler Crusher 3000 doesn't want his money to benefit society in this particular instance, and his reason is that he doesn't want his money to be used by the government to benefit society, why would he want any of his money to go to any government service? Why should he want any government service to exist? If, hypothetically, private companies were to take over these roles, he could still afford to pay for the specific ones he needs without needing to subsidize the poor. The poors might not be able to afford those things anymore, but that's their fault. And so you see, he's already on the path to supporting tearing it all down. But let's not kid ourselves focusing specifically on this idealistic angle of conservatism. Republicans since Reagan, if not earlier, have been set on gutting services beneficial and essential to average people so that corporations and the rich can pay less in taxes. Conservatism is a top-down operation in which the ultra-rich seek to exploit common human selfishness to get politicians elected and legislation passed that leads to an increase in their profits and shareholder value at the expense of the working class. And by working class, I don't just mean the poor, the unskilled workers, the class underneath the middle. I'm talking about everyone who does actual work, and only excluding those parasites sitting on top of their incomprehensibly large piles of gold, watching us toil below for even a fraction of that wealth to keep ourselves afloat. These rich and the politicians who suck them off have spent decades working to spread the disease of conservatism to the common people, to get them to lose faith in the ability of a strong government to improve their lives, because they know such a government backed by the will of a working class that knows what's truly best for them is one that will make their shareholders cry. A functional government wouldn't let them profit off of dumping sewage into drinking water. It wouldn't let them drag their workers through long hours at slave wages. It wouldn't let them destroy our ability to live on this earth. A functional government would punish them for poisoning its people. It would enforce good working standards. It would force them to operate in a way that is at least somewhat reasonably conscious of the needs of average people and the future of humanity. All things that would cost corporations more, and then an additional portion might even be skimmed off the top so that the nation's citizens might be able to afford a yearly checkup with their doctor and dentist, send their children to quality schools, or retire in their old age with financial comfort. Republicans have to try to convince their voters that a government which does nothing for them is preferable because they'll pay less in taxes. The reality is that they don't want the government to exist unless it's benefiting the corporations, because the rich are the ones whose profits increase massively, whereas the common people end up spending more, either because the services they once got from the government are now only available from private companies, or because of the direct consequences of not having those services at all. Elon Musk and his Republican allies don't care about the working class affording healthcare. They don't care about your children going to school. They don't care about your children dying of food poisoning. They don't want you to retire, and they never have, because while to you, the working class might be your fellow co-workers, your friends, your family, your fellow humans, Elon Musk and Republican politicians and the corporate donors and lobbyists who pay them have only ever seen slaves, meant to be obedient good little boys and girls who work until they die. Elon Musk wants you to work until you die, and he's currently the biggest factor in making that the ultimate reality for you and everyone else you know. But we shouldn't mistake this as simply an insane power trip by an individual evil retard. We need to recognize and make others aware of the fact that the problem is conservative ideology, because it is what tells people to not trust the government as a tool for good. Conservatism is what tells us we shouldn't try making people's lives better. Conservatism is what tells us we need to get rid of government services. Conservatism is what tells us to trust in the free market, the same market which will poison you, work you to death, and destroy the planet we live on if it means a marginal increase in quarterly profits, if there isn't a government there, controlled by the people, to stop it from doing that. Conservative ideology is exactly the disease which leads people to support dismantling the government like this. And so what we should be saying is that conservatism is why the planes are crashing. Conservatism is why millions are losing healthcare. Conservatism is why we got rid of cancer research. Conservatism is why we're gonna let underfunded schools rot. Conservatism is why there's shit in your water. Conservatism is why you have to work multiple jobs, and conservatism is why you're gonna be doing that till you're dead. What we're seeing with Elon in the government right now is merely a stupidly obvious example of someone's business interests creating policy. But the fact is, the Republican Party has wanted to do most of these things for decades. If we want meaningful progress, we need to attack the ideology itself, not just the most embarrassing individuals implementing that ideology. The American people need to know that it isn't just stupid extreme conservatives who make their life worse, but anyone in government pushing conservative ideology of any form. And I should clarify that this is by no means meant to downplay the unprecedented evil and authoritarian nature of this presidency, and how frightening it really is. We are living through an administration that wants to codify fascism in America, and we have a civic duty to call attention to fascism when we see it in the propaganda being posted on the White House website, when we see it in protests and criticism getting cracked down on, when we see it in the deportations and dehumanization and ignoring the rule of law. But one day, we're going to escape this regime, and I fear there will come an opportunity for some supposed new wave of Republican politicians, calling themselves moderate or classical conservatives or something like that, calling for a pre-Trump, pre-MAGA, common sense conservatism. And they might be successful, despite arguing for the same deregulation, the same privatization, the same tax cuts for the rich, the same dismantling of our critical agencies and services, because they figured out how to dress it up in a suit and tie again. They'll argue for it again because this is what conservatism has always argued for, and so we need to be aware of that fact. We need to be able to recognize what it sounds like for the future, and we need to develop an insatiable hatred for it as we witness what it does to our country for at least the next 4 years. Because once we escape this administration, we need to resolve to never slide back in this direction ever ever again. Remember that this is what it leads to.